everyone, this is Heather. Thanks for joining me. Today I've got a card tutorial for you. I'm going to show you how I made this really fun Halloween card of a little toad inside of a jar. What you're going to need is some stamps from some different sets. I really love to mix and match different stamps from different companies or different sets. And so I'm using stamps from several different companies today. I'm using a large jar from the Mason jar set from Inkadinkado. Sorry about the reflection. And there are lots of companies that have jars. So whatever works for the stamps that you are using, the label and the little toad, but I'm using the largest one from this set. I'm also using the frog and solid star from this Lawn Fawn set, and it is called Critters Ever After. It is one of my favorite Lawn Fawn sets. It's so cute. The dragon and the griffin, the unicorn and the little castle. But today we're going to turn the little frog into a toad. Then I'm also using a label from a Halloween set called Magic Potions, and this is from Close to My Heart, and it's got some really fun potion labels for Halloween cards, and I'm using the Pickled Toad label. I know that the Inkadinkado and the Lawn Fawn sets are currently available for purchase. I don't think that this Close to My Heart set is available any longer, but there are lots of clip art sites online where you can find lots of fun labels that you could print out. There's a lot of other companies that have cool labels. You could type in what you want or handwrite a label if you can't find exactly what you're looking for. And also we're going to need a card base. I just took a black piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock, cut it in half and scored and folded it for the card base. Also going to want some pattern paper, and I have had this for a while and I apologize, I can't remember where it came from, but it's just black with green stars. It just went with the color scheme that I chose, but any kind of fun Halloween pattern paper will work. We're also going to need some black cardstock, some green cardstock, some white cardstock, and some vellum. The dimensions for these for the black is 4.5 by 2 3/4. The green, the white, and the vellum are all 4 1/4 by 2 1/2. But that's going to vary depending on how large your label is, how large your jar is. The green and the black will just be layered on top of one another. So your white and your vellum might need to be different sizes, but that's what I'm using for my project. So let's go ahead and get the pattern paper adhered to the front of the card. Just use my adhesive runner. And so it's cut, so just a little bit of the edge will show of the black around. So we're going to set that aside. And we're going to grab our piece of vellum. And because we're working on a slick non-porous surface, we're going to be using StazOn. So I'm just using StazOn black for the label. So I'm just going to ink that up. Whoops, I got ink on myself. And I apologize for the cat scratches on my hands. Okay, so be really careful when you're stamping this out because it is sort of a slick surface. And it does not need to be centered or anything because we're going to cut it out. Let's get a good image there. Set that aside. And that is all that we need the StazOn ink for. And we're going to let that kind of set and dry for a second. I'm going to get my white piece and my jar stamp and my black memento ink, which is kind of my favorite black go-to ink. And we're going to ink up the jar. And we're going to stamp it on the white cardstock. And again, it doesn't have to be centered because we're going to also be cutting it out. Get that stamped out. So there's the jar. And now we're going to use the same black memento ink to stamp the little toad or frog. We're going to turn him into a toad in the inside bottom of the jar. And you could also use a bottle, would be cute, or if you have a little clear glass cloche or anything like that you know, kind of a type of container that you could put your little frog inside. We're done with the memento ink. And now I'm going to add some color to our little toad. And the jar. I'm using some alcohol-based markers from Spectrum Noir. I'm using a gray that is BG5 and yellow that is GB5. And then I'm also using a green. This is the light old olive from Stampin' Up. Unfortunately, they're not making these markers anymore, but any kind of a medium to dark green that you have. And you don't necessarily have to use the alcohol-based markers. You could use any coloring medium that you would like. We're going to use the gray for the lid of the jar, for the mason jar top. Color that in. You could use watercolors or colored pencils. For the spots on the toad, I really like mixing the alcohol-based markers. It just kind of gives a cool look. So I've just colored the lid of the jar, and then just so that it looks like the frog's not just kind of floating in the jar, I'm going to also use the same gray just around the bottom just to give him a little bit of a shadow, just so it kind of grounds him inside there. And we're done with the gray, so I am going to get the green marker and my color in my little toad here. He's so cute. And we'll grab the yellow marker to add some little warts onto him to turn this little frog into a toad. So I've just added the green alcohol marker. I'm going to take the fine tip point of the yellow, and I'm just going to touch the tip and hold it there for a second and then lift. And that yellow will actually show through that green. It sort of pulls some of the green color away and shows the yellow. So you don't want to hold it there too long, you'll get too large of a dot. But you just want to touch that tip, leave it there for a second, and then move on. And it's really cool how they sort of react to one another. And you get that nice yellow spots. Isn't that cool? So now instead of a frog, we've got a little warty toad. So we're done with the yellow marker. And now I've got the solid star from the same Lawn Fawn set that the frog came from, and I've got two little ink pads. These are from Stampin' Up. I've got Crushed Curry and Pear Pizzazz. I just kind of picked some yellow and green that went with my color scheme. I'm going to take the solid star and just kind of with one color first and then clean it off and do the other. I'm just going to fill the jar up with some stars. He just sort of looked lonely inside there. It goes along with my pattern paper, and it just adds a little bit more of a magical kind of look. So I'm just randomly stamping the stars in yellow around the jar, leaving some room for some of the green. And I'm just going to take a paper towel that's got some cleaner on it and just clean off the ink from that, and get the green and just sort of fill in with some green stars. Just add some kind of whimsy to the inside of the jar. And part of this will be covered up by the label, but so I've just randomly stamped some yellow and green stars inside of the jar. And we are done with the green ink, and we're gonna set our little jar aside for a second, and we're gonna go back to the vellum piece that we stamped earlier with the StazOn, and I'm going to turn it over and place it face down on my work surface so that I'm working on the back side. I'm going to grab my ink, and I'm just going to pull the ink color across the back of the vellum. I wanted to add some color to the label, kind of give it sort of an aged look. So I'm just direct to paper, adding some of that ink, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I think it kind of gives it a little bit more of an aged look if you have some kind of darker areas and lighter areas, but just make sure that you've covered around where the label is, where we're going to cut out. And we're done with the yellow ink now, and I'm going to grab a clean paper towel, and I'm going to lightly buff the back where we've added the ink. It takes away a little bit of the ink, but it also helps to dry it. So I'm just kind of rubbing the back there just to get some of that excess off. And so when you turn it over, you've got that kind of nice aged label look. So we'll set that aside for a second and grab our scissors, and we're going to cut out the jar with our little toad inside. And I just followed along the lines of the stamp and cut the jar out. And I'm going to stop real quick and just cut this out because you don't need to watch me cut the entire thing out, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I have cut out the jar image, just following along the lines of the stamp. And now I'm going to cut out the vellum label. And I want to leave just a little bit of a border around the edge because this is sort of a little bit of a detailed image. And it'd be kind of hard to cut all the way around. Just kind of moving my paper, holding my scissors in place, and you might get a little bit of ink on your fingers at this point if there's still a little bit of that yellow ink that hasn't completely dried. But that's okay. That is part of stamping, is getting messy, isn't it? So, okay, so I've just cut away the excess, and I've got my fun little vellum label. And I'm going to pull my jar over and figure out where I want that label to go. And you could leave it like this with the edges hanging off. I want it to look like that it was wrapped around the jar. So I'm just going to turn the jar over and fold the little bit of the label around to the back and take just a little piece of just regular Scotch tape and tape those edges of that label down on the back. It's got some Scotch tape on there. So that's what it looks like from the front. Isn't it cute? So now I'm going to bring my other pieces over, and I'm going to adhere my, oops, wrong side, there we go. I'm going to adhere my green piece to the black. That, and then adhere that piece to the pattern paper that we adhered earlier to the card front. I'm going to center that, and I did use a little bit of textured basil paper. I don't know if you can see, you can probably see the texture there. I just like that nice texture that it adds. And then on the back of the jar, I'm going to add a couple of foam squares just to kind of pop that up in the back. Take off the backing paper and add that to the front of our card. And there is our cute little pickled toad in a jar. Really fun for Halloween. You could, if you wanted to mask it off, you could add, you know, like just a pile of toads inside the jar. Or depending on your label, if you maybe have a bat label or an owl label, you could put a bat or an owl in there. I really like the touch that the vellum gives so that you can still kind of see through the jar or see through the label into the jar. I just think that's really fun. So I hope that you enjoyed this card tutorial. Please check out my channel. I have some product reviews and other card tutorials on there, and I really appreciate you joining me today. Thank you so much, and this is Heather. Have a happy Halloween. Bye.